Tonight is the opening of our brand new special exhibit, Secrets of Shangri-la, in the Women at Project Y. And tonight you get to hear from the women who made this exhibit possible, and we are very excited for all that they're going to share with us. I do have a couple of announcements. This is our regular March lecture. We want to thank Enterprise Bank and Trust for their sponsorship of this series.
Well, welcome everybody. Ordinarily, I would say it's rather rare for you to see archive staff doing public presentations. We tend to be an introverted lot, but if you were here in January, you saw our faces. So we're here tonight. We're excited about our exhibit, and we just wanted to share some of the stories that we hold in our archives, some of the information we didn't have room to share with you. I'm going to use Pat Patterson-Krikorian, for those of you who are longtime Los Alamos residents. As an example, I'm going to contextualize WAC history, both nationally and here in Los Alamos at Project Y, using Pat as my example. But my research into the Women's Army Corps, while it may have started in the halcyon days of COVID, actually dates way back to when I was a kid. I was entranced with the Andrews Sisters and the Abbott and Costello movies, singing Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and that sort of started me down this path. So I'm going to have to try to do this three-handed with two hands. Is it not? Try. There we go. So in May of 1942, President Franklin Roosevelt, we're going in and out, this is great, signed into public law establishing the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. This was actually the first time that women were allowed to serve in the military in non-combat roles, but they were an auxiliary unit. They weren't full members of the military. The Palace Athene, which you see at the top there, was chosen to represent victory and wisdom by fighting only just causes. Led by Oveta Colt Hobby, famous from anybody fly through Hobby Airport in Texas. She was Governor Hobby's wife. She was the first director of the auxiliary. It wasn't long though, and will not surprise some of you in the audience, that the Women's Auxiliary Corps faced a slander campaign, and we do cover that in our exhibit. You'll learn a little bit about it. But there were a lot of false claims about the morality and behavior of the auxiliary, questioning their feminism and patriotism. It discouraged some women from enlisting. Some women who were already enlisted had a lot of distress and negative experiences. But despite that campaign, 35,000 women enlisted in that first year in 1942. I thought they were demonstrating a lot of patriotism, right? Yeah, will you click for me? Thank you. Okay, so this is where Pat Patterson comes in. At the time, she was Kate. She was 20 years old. She's a clerk in Oxford, Mississippi. She'd been to business school, so she's working for the Department of Agriculture. And she enlisted in 1942. In November, she was 20 years old. Go ahead to the first photo. This is her letter from the recruitment office, inviting her to come down for her appointment, telling her what she needs to bring. And the next photo, this is her at the age of 20. In a later interview, she said that she joined, quote, "We were all involved in one way or another, all 5 of us." She had siblings. "My mother even worked in a munitions plant." So our cute little 20-year-old Pat, at that time known as Kate, is off to basic training. Go to the next slide. So basic training. The auxiliary had 5 training centers. You could go to Fort Des Moines, Iowa. You could go to Daytona, Florida. You could go to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and there was actually a 5th training center comprised of Camps Ruston and Polk in Louisiana and Monticello in Arkansas. Those camps were pretty crappy, to be honest. They were built to house what they anticipated to be European POWs. So they weren't actual Army barracks. It wasn't actually an Army base. It was substandard, to be honest. But some of the women were sent there for their training. Later, when we convert to the Women's Army Corps, those camps are long gone because we started filling them with POWs in summer of '43. These women, I just love this. This is a press photo of women in basic. That is their WAC exercise suit. They wore shorts underneath there, but that could unbutton up to your waist so that you could have freedom of movement. And on the back of the press photo, it says, "It's not all parades and desk work for these girls." Next slide. So Pat goes to basic. She gets Daytona Beach. Go ahead. Daytona Beach welcomed the auxiliary. They published, this is a publication we have, this all comes from our archives, letting the women know where they could eat, where they could shop, what they could do, all the amusements. Go ahead, keep going. Daytona, they weren't in a barracks, they were in a hotel at the water's edge. It was beautiful. Pat, she really did get lucky. Instead of a traditional parade ground, they are parading on the promenade sort of boulevard there at the water's edge in Daytona Beach. She stayed in Daytona after basic. She was gonna plan to go overseas, so while she worked as an instructor in the Army Specialized Training School, she trained to go overseas. She studied jiu-jitsu and all kinds of things, foreign languages, stenography, ready to go overseas. Is there one more? Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is in our collection as well from her. All the WACs were given this little booklet. It's called My Life in the Service, where she's recorded people she went through basic with, experiences she had, people that she knew, important dates. It's a fabulous little piece of history. Meanwhile, in Los Alamos, we've already gotten our first arrival of auxiliaries. Now remember, General Groves thought this was going to be a small operation, right? So he thought he just needed like a little handful of women. Maybe they could come do some typing and stuff. So 6 auxiliaries come in April of 1943. They've got 1 commanding officer, and first they lived in Spruce Cottage. You see here. And this is a couple of WACs later, but they're posing outside of Spruce Cottage because Spruce Cottage got the nickname the WAC Shack during that brief period that the women lived there. But women kept coming. At first, it was just a couple here and there. General Groves realized pretty quickly, as you all know, that this was going to be a much bigger operation than he anticipated, and he really wanted military women here to do some of the necessary work. So they got more women, and more women, and more women. Go ahead to the next one. They're eating in Fuller Lodge at this point, but we're quickly outpacing what we've got. So they start moving women into those 3-bedroom sun apartments. They put 16 women on bunk beds in these apartments. You can see from the floor plan, they weren't exactly luxurious, as you all know from reading some of the memoirs. It was clear that a barrack needed to be built by the end of July when another 28 women arrived, and by now we're close to 45, 47 women, somewhere in there, plus commanding officers. By now, they're dining in North Mess. They can't even eat in Fuller Lodge anymore. There's just too many of them. But in the meantime, while all this is happening, Pat's in Daytona. We've established our Corps detachment here. Go ahead and go to the next one. The Women's Army Corps comes into existence. So the Navy, as Katie will talk to you later about, women were full-fledged members of the military from the beginning. They got paid, they got benefits, all of the things. The auxiliaries did not. So Franklin Roosevelt says, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we need to make them full-fledged members of the military. And he signs a law now that's the Women's Army Corps. And Oveta Culp, Hobby, go ahead to the next photo, please, is sworn in as the head of the Women's Army Corps. Now this is her swearing in for the auxiliary. Street clothes, cute hat, gloves, right? She basically was running a sort of support group for the military. Go to the next photo, please. Here she's swearing into the Women's Army Corps. You can see just from the imagery in these 2 photos the difference in the way they were viewed, the way they were treated, the way they were seen, and the roles they would play. So while this is happening, Pat, who's preparing to go overseas in Daytona Beach, she's woken up at 2 a.m. and she is told to collect her things and get down to the railroad station. She's not told anything else. So she goes. Go ahead to the next photo. These are her orders. She knows she's going to Fort Sill. It didn't seem like it made a lot of sense to her because she's going overseas, but okay, sure, whatever. Go ahead. There's her tag. She's written later Los Alamos bound, but she has tag on her luggage. She gets on the train. When she gets to Memphis, she gets off and she calls her mom and she says, "Mom, it's happening. I'm going overseas." She is so excited. They got a few other WACs there in Memphis. A few MPs got on the train, and she went to Fort Sill. She was in Fort Sill for about a month. She was sent out again. Okay, she's going overseas, right? Well, what's she doing in Albuquerque? She gets to Albuquerque. She's very confused. And she said, "We decided to go out and eat that night, but discovered that our doors were being guarded by MPs. We got to go, but an MP went with us." Well, then she started thinking, something's up. This is not right. Why are MPs guarding me? So the next day, they wake up in Albuquerque, they get on a private bus, and she finds herself in Santa Fe. And she said, "Man, I thought the Lord sent us away for 40 days or more, maybe 40 years for all I knew." Think about this. She's now 21. She has no idea where she's going, why she's going. It was pretty scary for her, to be honest. She rode up to Los Alamos in a 1936 station wagon with a woman named Sarah, an engineer who she said was scared all the time. And yeah, you know I'm trying to figure out who Sarah was. So go to the next picture. Now remember, she came from Florida. When we arrived in Los Alamos, it was cold, and all we had were our summer khaki uniforms. We were issued CCC slickers, V-neck knit sweaters, and big R-buckle overshoes until we were finally issued winter uniforms. Pat's not in this photo, but these are WACs arriving by bus up here in their summer uniforms about a week after she came. So that gives you an idea what it looks like. Can you imagine Los Alamos being so cold in August that you want your winter clothes? Right? Go ahead, let's go to the next slide. So she's in Los Alamos. She has got altitude sickness. She's sick for about 2 weeks. They stuck her on one of those sleeping porches. We're not quite sure where. My guess is perhaps Spruce Cottage, because the commanding officers were still using Spruce Cottage at that point for their administrative office. But she says she adjusted very well after 2 weeks. She initially worked in finance, where she wrote government vouchers to pay for goods, and then she became the secretary to the contracting officer. She lived in close quarters with other WACs, but remember, she's not in a barracks yet. So she's either in one of those apartments or crammed into the sleeping porch at Spruce Cottage. She says she's only there, though, for about a week. That changed because remember that group of women that came at the end of July, they quickly realized, this is ridiculous. So, in August of 1943, they built the first barrack for women. And let's just start going through the photos. This is not T-228. Barracks T-228 was the first barrack completed for the Women's Army Corps. This is a photo we could not use in our exhibit because it's a picture of a picture, but I thought you'd like to see an interior of T-251, which was the last barrack built. You see rows of cots, foot lockers. It was not glamorous. Go ahead. This, however, is the sun deck of T-228, and that is Pat laying on her back in the middle of the group of women there. Go ahead. This is the same T-228 sun deck. These are all the WACs on Victory in Europe Day, also from Pat's collection. So the WACs had their own buildings right here in town. Eventually, the officers moved out of Spruce Cottage. That was given over to civilian scientists. This is the WAC company car, and behind her is what became the WAC administrative building. There, the WACs had their orderly room, which is where all of the records were kept, all of the official paperwork was done. The officers had their offices there, and they had a day room for entertaining. Go ahead. This is where they got their mail. And this was one of the mess halls that they ate in before the WAC mess hall was completed. This is, all right. So, we have our women sworn in here by Colonel Ashbridge at the end of August into the Women's Army Corps. By then, we're down to 43 women. Go ahead to the next slide.
Oops.
Oh, sorry, that's their mess hall. I thought we were done.
Okay.
Okay, so our WACs in Los Alamos. We had over 375 women that came through Los Alamos as part of the Women's Army Corps. Official records will say that we had 260, that 422 women total served in the Manhattan Project, but that's not correct because I'm obsessive compulsive and I have a spreadsheet of women. I have identified 382 women for sure that came through Los Alamos. I have another 16 that supposedly came through Los Alamos that I can't confirm. Overall, for all of the Manhattan Project, I've identified 611 women that served during the war. Our WACs were older than the average WAC in the United States. I've found the military records for about half of them. That's difficult because there was a fire in the National Archives, but the average age right now that I'm at is about 28, which is a little older than the average WAC. Our WACs here in Los Alamos, over 25% went to college, which was much higher than the national average. One, Mary Miller, had a PhD. So very educated, very accomplished, very talented women were sent here. They were given intelligence tests at basic, so they were sort of weeded out. Approximately 18% of our WACs were married. 22% were divorced, much higher than the average national rate at that time of 4 to 5%. Some were separated. We had a few widows. We had a couple that had dependent children that they left behind to serve in the military. Eventually, we had 4 barracks for WACs, and we can just start going through the pictures. And they had a lot of jobs: clerks, secretaries, nurses, med techs, dietitians, chemists, draftsmen. We had a machinist, phlebotomist, switchboard. So many jobs you can think of. When you look at the org charts for the laboratory at that time, you don't always see names, right? Because they're just WACs. But you'll see WAC, WAC, WAC here, WAC here, WAC here. Mary Miller, our chemist, she became an alternate group leader, which we only had one female group leader in the lab the whole time during the war, so that's quite an accomplishment. They worked 6 days a week like everyone else. I love this picture. This is one of our motor pool drivers, Betty Stuck. That's what they wore when they drove. Keep going. This Friday night, you'll see this in the exhibit, but the WACs, they worked 6 days a week, but on Friday nights, they had to clean up to pass inspection if they wanted to go out on their one day off. Go ahead. This is Pat's request to go into Santa Fe. Go ahead. This is her request to go on to furlough. A couple of our WACs played with Harold Fishbein and his band. You'll see Nell Means there in the front row on the left. Sybil Carter is the second WAC in. So they had fun. There were so many women here and so few men. Here's Pat swimming. I just love this picture. She's in a bathing suit. She's so cute. And this is Pat, apparently, I don't know, maybe using her jujitsu as a soldier. I'm not sure. But I think it just speaks to some of the fun and personality. Remember, they were all so young that they had a great time. We had some really interesting women up here. They played basketball, they played baseball, softball. The WACs won the league title for their league in the summer of '46. We had a bootlegger up here. One of the drivers, she got arrested. She's one of my favorites. They're all my favorites. I love them all. But Maxine Quimby, if you follow us on Facebook, I did a post on Maxine Quimby so that you could learn more about her. She's just great. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so Pat's getting ready to get discharged. At this time, lots of people are leaving the project. It's after the test, right? But, go ahead to the, but she and her friends decide they want to have one last sort of hurrah. The Los Alamos Expeditionary Force, which Katie has done some really great research on, and she can name all of those women. I can tell you Pat Patterson was in it. I can tell you Nandis Jackson was in it, and Betsy Elders, but I don't remember the others. But so they went on this great trip, and you can talk to Katie afterward to hear, because it was one adventurous mishap after another till they finally got to the Rose Bowl in LA. But our WACs mostly went and got discharged out of Fort Sam Houston. Go ahead, keep going. These are from Nandis Jackson's scrapbook that we have in our archives. Keep going, yeah. This actually is not our photo. This is one of the very few rare photos. This came from National Nuclear. But this shows one of our WACs, Anna Kissel, at the separation center with the sign. I just really liked it. Keep going. So, Pat was here for a long time. Some people were here just for a short time. They got altitude sickness and left. One of those first 6 auxiliaries was only here maybe 6 weeks, and she had to be sent out. Our longest posted WAC came in July 31st, 1943. She's one of those 31sters, and she was the last group out in October of 46. Her name was Jane Wainwright, and our WACs tended not to move between the sites. They tended to stay here and serve out their enlistment here in Los Alamos. It was pretty rare, actually, that a WAC got sent away for whatever. Usually it was a medical reason. Go ahead. So Pat went home to Mississippi. She went back to her job with the Department of Agriculture, but in August of 46, she was invited to come back. And remember, her friends are still here, so she comes back. She starts working at the lab. Like I said, WACs are still here in August. By now, though, by August of 1946, they are really starting to get discharged because the war is basically over. Everybody here thinks the job here is done. So we went from a peak of 283 women in November of 45 down to 84 in June of 1946. They start closing the barracks, kind of concentrating the women. There had been a WAC mess hall that had been built for them in September, but by September of 45, by September of 46, that's been converted to a civilian cafeteria. If you remember West Cafeteria, that was the WAC mess hall. And so our last detachment of WACs was discharged in October of 46. They broke up into 2 groups over 2 days. But we had one last WAC that stayed at least, she left somewhere between February and April of 1947. She was the base postal officer, and she stayed until they could replace her. Go ahead. So this is the WAC farewell dinner here in Fuller Lodge. And that's their little menu somebody drew for them, their little goodbye. And this is Margaret Morton in front of the new permanent base office in January of 47. Like many of our WACs, Pat met and fell in love with someone here in Los Alamos. But remember, she wanted to go overseas. She got to go overseas with the State Department, so she went and used all those skills she learned in Daytona Beach. Go ahead. She came back to Los Alamos. Many of our WACs either stayed or came back to Los Alamos. Many WACs and soldiers and scientists met, got married here, fell in love, stayed. Pat is one of them. She worked for the, she married Crick. Go ahead. There's their invitation. There's her telegram. She got really sick the week before the wedding, and Crick called her maid of honor and said the wedding was off. Does anybody in here know Pat? Do you think that she said, okay, yeah, the wedding's up? No, the wedding happened. But he had already called her maid of honor, who lived in Texas, and so here's the telegram from her maid of honor, hey, I can't make it. He told me it was off. Go ahead. There's their wedding photo. So she worked here for 38 years and retired from the lab in 77. and she passed away in 2013. Now, very quickly, I'm going to tell you, because it sets up Katie, some of the problems that you have doing this kind of research and some of the problems I had. Go ahead to the next slide. Structural barriers in the historical records. Women are historically underdocumented because many institutions prioritize recording the activities of men in positions of authority. And for too long, the Manhattan Project was the same. I see Diana in the audience. Diana, people know about Mary Miller because of your work, right? She was an important woman who's so hard to find in the historical record. Official records, again, focus on command structures and leadership. Again, in the 1940s, overwhelmingly held by men. The org chart at the lab, very few WACs are listed by name. And it is so frustrating to look at that and you think, this is it. I know who was where and what they were doing. And you see whack, 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 whack. Okay, great. Right? The new book that's coming out, Devil Reached Toward the Sky, right before this, we went and we looked in the back. He says it's the most comprehensive study of the Manhattan Project and the race to the bomb. Women's Army Corps, who some of them were so critical in getting to that point, have 3 mentions, and that's it, even today. Archival silences, right? An absence of documentation about certain groups. Military records were hard for me. There was a fire in the National Archives in 1974, but too often, women aren't even in the record or they're not mentioned. Let's talk about naming and identity challenges. The 16 women I can't identify, I only know their married names. I know that Mary Jones was on the reunion list. Who's that? Or a Mrs. John Doe. Okay, right? Informal contributions. A lot of women's work was in informal and domestic spaces. So you have fewer handwritten records. So you have to get creative with the research that you're doing. Newspapers have been pretty good for me for this time period when the official record has been quiet. But even then, you don't always find this kind of record for the Women's Army Corps in the local papers. And the one that Katie is working so hard to change, and I'll let her talk more about it, is the archival description practices. They reflect gender biases. Again, it's just a different period, a different time. But even within our own collection, we've been around since 1968. Stephanie found incredible photos and WAC records under the WAC's husband name, right? She came out and said, look what I found in the Charles Vieira collection. And we were all, well, look at that, because we have incredible stuff in there, and we've dug and dug and dug and dug out the things that you will see in that exhibit and more that we don't even have. So these are some of our challenges. Reconstructing stories, a lot of this has to rely on letters, diaries. We've got unpublished memoirs. We've got an incredible collection of scrapbooks from women, but it hurts sometimes to think about how much we don't have and how much has been lost. A few years ago, I missed an auction for one of the WAC commanding officer's personal items that her family just sold in a yard sale, that they didn't give to an archive or a repository. And that's just gone. I contacted the buyer and he was like, yeah, I have a military museum, I'm keeping it all. Great. In his garage. So nobody sees it. It matters because recovering untold stories, women's histories and others, right? Not just women, lots of underrepresented people, helps produce a more complete and accurate understanding of the past. And I think that our work with this exhibit demonstrates women were active participants here in areas that are traditionally portrayed as male-dominated. And the women, one more, women like Pat those collections are so important. Because of Pat, we have over 500 letters that these women wrote back and forth to each other after the war. Because of Pat's collection, we've got materials from other WACs she was friends with. Go ahead to the next. We've got all these letters. We've got the Hallie Lawrence collection that she's pictured here with Pat. We have Helen Embry Vieira's unpublished memoir. Okay, big deal. She worked for George Kistiakowsky, the explosives expert here in the Manhattan Project. She talks about the work she did for and with him. She talks about working with Norris Bradbury. We wouldn't have this if somebody had just said, Grandma's stuff, let's get rid of it. Go ahead. Iris Bell, one of those 31sters that came in July, wrote a book. Now, mostly it's about her friends that were in T28 that she came with. Invaluable information. She had to self-publish, but we have that because of Pat. And Nandis Jackson's scrapbook. And just because we love her, this is Nandis. Is she not a boss? Right? And if we have time, do we have time? Because I know I probably went long. We feature the Los Alamos Blues, and I'm sorry I went long. I love these women. There's so much more that we could talk about and share. But we feature the Los Alamos Blues, which was written by one of the members of the Women's Army Corps here in Los Alamos, in our exhibit, and I thought you might like to hear it.
And who is singing it?
So.
Yeah, introduce.
Oh yeah, so this is Florence Pachter-Shulkin. Another, I said they're all my favorite, but she's another one of my favorites. Florence came here as a single young woman. You'll learn more about her in the exhibit. Florence actually helped found the Jewish Center here in Los Alamos. For a long time, she was the only female that participated in the Jewish services here during the Manhattan Project. And she's also got unpublished memoirs and things, but her family clued me into this video. It's on YouTube, and go ahead, let's play it so we can hear it.
I'm Florence Shulkin, and I'm going to sing a song
That we used to sing at Los Alamos.
Huh?
That you used to sing at Los Alamos.
I used to sing at Los Alamos back in the good old days.
During the war.
During the war.
And you were in the Women's Army Corps.
And I was in the Women's Army Corps. Shall I go ahead?
Yep.
We're just a PO number. We have no real address. They say we were selected. We wonder for the best. We're not like other people. No one knows what we do. So P.O. Box 1663, here's to you. They put us on a mountain outside of Santa Fe, where the only signs of wildlife are GI wolves at bay. We're on a secret mission, and secret work we do, where we're not to tell folks what we do. But I don't know, do you? And when the war is over, down from the hill we'll roam. We'll ride down from this Shangri-la right to a veteran's home. So heed my words, you children, of brilliance do not boast, or you'll end up as we have up in Los Alamos.
Is she not lovable?
Is she not lovable? Right, and as you learn more, and Katie's going to tell you about an equally fascinating woman who's been left out of the historical record, you really develop such a feel of warmth and admiration for these women. Admiration. So we have a quick tech transfer. Does anybody have like a 20-second question?
No.
We will do Q&A at the end.
Yeah, we'll do Q&A at the end.
All right, she's up.
All right.
Look at Rachel go.
Hello everybody, my name is Katie Jones-Goldsby and I am the archivist with the Los Alamos Historical Society. And Tina has introduced you to the WACs, who were by and large the majority of the enlisted women here in Los Alamos during the war. But a lot of people, especially if you're not up on Los Alamos history, are unaware that there was one woman enlisted in the Navy here during the project. There was a small naval contingent, which we'll talk about, and I want to introduce you to Cordelia Louise Newkirk, who is the only enlisted wave in Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project. So before I talk about Louise, I wanted to start with this term that we use in the archival world, and it's called archival debt. And the Dictionary of Archival Terminology from the Society of American Archivists defines this as the burden on archival workers and repositories resulting from previous decisions and practices. And so Tina mentioned a little bit about this in terms of changing knowledge and research in archival theory in how we process archival records when they come into the archive. In the Los Alamos Historical Society archives, archival debt looks like over 3 decades of limited access, a historic lack of resources, an overwhelming backlog of unprocessed materials, and in that backlog, hidden collections that we are consistently unearthing. Go to the next one. So our first digital collection management system was unveiled in the early 1990s, and it is a custom-built FileMaker Pro database. Records were manually entered into it from the paper accession record cards and the old catalog cards, because just like in a library, in the past, archives had card catalogs. I'm sure most of you remember getting to flip through a library card catalog. And so those were painstakingly transferred into the digital archive by hand by our archive workers in the 90s. And the assumption has always been that the entirety of both our archive, our paper and document and photograph collection, and our artifact collection were transferred over into the new digital archive. But as we began a survey about a year or so ago of our cataloged materials on our storage shelves, we realized that that wasn't the case. And so we discovered the Newkirk collection. So during the survey of materials in our archival storage, the collection was discovered on a high shelf in a scrapbook storage aisle. It included 1 document box, 1 larger scrapbook box, and an archival binder box. The numbering on the boxes indicated that the materials had been donated in 1987. And when I opened the scrapbook box, I could immediately see 2 scrapbooks, a handful of small artifacts, and some loose photographs. The scrapbooks were blue with large naval ships on the covers. It was apparent that some processing work had been done over the years, arrangement, which is our fancy way of saying organizing, short description notes, and rehousing into some archival sleeves. But there was no record of the collection in our digital CMS, though we did find the collection in the old paper card catalog. It had never been transferred into the digital collection management system, and therefore we just had no idea that it existed. Over the years, staff turnover, because it was on such a high shelf, we just had no record of it in our online catalog. So flipping through the collection, its importance was immediately recognized. The creator of the collection was a woman. That always makes us excited when we have something that is from a woman. She had been enlisted, and she was in the waves during World War II. And then there was obviously a Los Alamos connection. Go to the next one. So a quick personal note about finding this collection. So sometimes we come across collections in the archive that feel serendipitous and connected, and this is one of those collections for me. When I opened the first scrapbook and saw the name Cordelia Louise, I got goosebumps. Cordelia Louise was my great-grandmother's name, and both myself, my middle name is Louise, and my daughter, whose first name is Cordelia, are named for her. So I immediately wanted to know more about this woman, and I discovered some brief mentions of her in some of the histories of the Navy contribution to the Manhattan Project. But there was never anything more than 1 line, that she had been assigned to work in the office and assist the other naval officers. So Cordelia Louise Newkirk went by Louise, Lou to her friends. She was born in 1916 in Kansas and worked as a bookkeeper and office manager after high school. And judging by the glowing recommendation letters in her collection, she was a skilled office administrator. In 1942, she and a friend enlisted in the Waves, which this is a clipping from her local Kansas newspaper that is in one of the scrapbooks that we found. Go to the next one. So the women accepted for volunteer emergency services are the Waves. They are the women's branch of the Naval Reserve, established in July of 1942. And unlike the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which had women serving with the Army but not in the Army, the Waves were enlisted members of the Navy Reserve from its inception. So once the Waves were established, the WACs became the Women's Army Corps with full enlistment privileges. They were like, oh, if the Navy's gonna do it, I guess we will too. So the Waves were intended to free up men for war duties, and you can see on the screen Louise's Wave duties up until she was ordered to Los Alamos. So she did her basic training in Stillwater, Oklahoma. In December of 43, she went to the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas. And in 1944, when she became an officer, she went to midshipman school at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Is it Massachusetts? Yeah, I think it's okay. In December of 1945, she was at the Naval Air Station in Miami, Florida, but not for long. So, she did attend training in Stillwater, Oklahoma on the campus of Oklahoma A&M, which is now Oklahoma State University. She went through yeoman training, which consisted of 6 weeks of boot camp, which is called indoctrination in the Navy, and 6 weeks of specialized training. Yeomen were the Navy office administrators, and Lou spent 8 hours a day in classroom instruction on filing, shorthand, stenography, typing, courses on history, public relations, naval correspondence, and decoding messages. Her first posting was to the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas. She first worked in the Senior Wave office, and by the summer of 1944, was the leading yeoman first class in the administrative office at the Naval Air Intermediate Training Command Staff, with supervision of over approximately 20 enlisted personnel of both sexes. So she was in Corpus Christi and doing such a phenomenal job that she was recommended for officer training in August of 1944 and received her ensign orders on the 28th of September 1944. So these are just some fun little photos from when she was in Corpus Christi, which is another weird serendipitous connection that I have with this collection because my husband and I actually moved here to Los Alamos from Corpus Christi, Texas. So this is my collection. I love this collection so much. Okay, you can go to the next one. So let's see, where did my here? By the time Lou entered midshipman school at Smith College, the women's officer training program had been shortened to 1 month, down from 3, because the women trainees, and this is a quote, proved smarter than expected. Her days were filled with lectures and exercise drills. In addition to their rigorous courses and lectures, the women were also given a deeper knowledge of being Navy. They took a crash course and deeper dive into naval lingo and etiquette, and they also attended the same courses that their male counterparts did on subjects such as how to recognize enemy ships and aircraft. And by all accounts, Lou was Navy to the core. I mean, she was so loyal to the Navy. Her collection, the recommendation letters, we have in her collection a whole folder full of all of the recommendation letters for her going to officer training. And by and large, everyone is saying that she was dedicated and loyal. Go to the next one. So after a few brief weeks at her first post as an officer in Miami, Florida, Louise received new orders in January of 1945. She was detached from her duties and ordered to proceed to Santa Fe, New Mexico and report to the mysterious engineer Project Y. And these are a paper from her orders. Go to the next one. Soon after receiving her orders, she also received a short letter from Hazel Greenbacker, the secretary to Captain William S. Parsons. She was told to present herself to 109 East Palace in Santa Fe, where a Mrs. McKibben would provide her with further instructions, and I'm sure all of you recognize that name. So, I won't give an exhaustive history of Deke Parsons, that could be 10 other presentations, but even by the time of the Manhattan Project, he was a decorated and well-known naval officer. So he was brought to the project because of his recognition as a leading ordnance expert. He became the assistant director under Oppenheimer and head of the ordnance division. He was also tasked with leading Project Alberta in 1945 and the combat delivery of the bombs. Most famously, he was the weaponeer on the Enola Gay. No, you're fine. So the Navy at Los Alamos. The Navy was tasked with both building the bombs and delivering them in combat. And so by 1945, there were 41 naval officers here at Los Alamos. Among them, several recognizable names: Norris Bradbury, Francis Birch, Frederick Dick Ashworth. Those are some of the more recognizable. Until 1945, Hazel Greenbacker had been the administrative assistant in Parsons' office. But by January of 1945, he had decided that he needed an enlisted naval office administrator. He requested a yeoman, but he received Ensign Louise Newkirk. Oh yes, and so I love this little, right on the right is a floor plan that Louise drew of the Navy office when security came down, when she was allowed to write to her parents after the war and tell them what she was doing. She sketched out this wonderful little sketch of the Navy office here in Los Alamos. And I know it's hard for y'all to see it, but it does show her desk, Hazel's desk, Captain Parsons' desk, Dick Ashworth's desk. It's just a wonderful little contextual to kind of show us of the office at the time. This is Louise at her desk in the Navy office. And the nameplate that you can't really see it in this. There's a larger photograph of this in the exhibit that you'll be able to see it, but that nameplate we have in the collection, and it is in that photograph. It is the nameplate that she used during the war. So we don't have Parsons' reasons why he felt the need to request an enlisted person to manage the Navy office in 1945, at least not in our collection, or from what I could find in his biography, or several histories of the Navy, contribution to the project. But we can place that request and Louise's arrival in context. So Louise reports to Dorothy McKibben at 109 East Palace on January 29th. By mid-February, Parsons is requesting that Louise travel to the 11th Naval District headquarters in San Diego to determine the best procedure to use in handling many details of naval administration which arise on this isolated post. Also in February of 1945, Dick Ashworth flies to Guam, tasked with informing General Chester Nimitz of the Pacific Command about the atomic program and the bombing mission. During his trip, Tinian Island is chosen as a departure point for the bombers. Project Alberta is officially formed in March of 1945. So that is the context of Louise's arrival. In many of her recommendations by her leading officers, Louise is noted as being extremely loyal to the Navy and able to be trusted with high-level orders and information. As office administrator of the Naval Office at Project Y, she was tasked with handling record-keeping, pay and travel of all naval personnel on the site. And you can start to imagine how being loyal and tight-lipped, as well as enlisted and under oath, could be beneficial in such a high-security situation. The memo on the screen, I don't know. Yeah, the memo on the screen, it's going to be hard for you all to see this, but is of 23rd of March 1945, shows correspondence from the dispersing office that references Commander Ashworth's flights in February and March, the months he was traveling on top-secret missions to Guam and Tinian. And so that is the kind of correspondence that would have been coming across Louise's desk at that time.
I think they can connect the dots.
Yeah. So life for Louise in Los Alamos wasn't all secrecy and administrative tasks. As an officer, Louise was a member of the Los Alamos Officers Club and socialized there and at other clubs around the site. I've looked for her in other photo collections, and I've only found her in 2 other photographs so far, one of which is this party at the Officers Club. And I circled in red Louise on the right in the crowd. She's standing against the wall in her blue uniform, while all of the other women are in civilian clothes. So I love that photograph, and I was very excited to find her in that photograph. The Parsons did a lot of entertaining for the project, and so in Louise's collections we have quite a few cocktail party invitations to her from the Parsons. Despite being enlisted, because Louise was the only woman in the Navy here, she was billeted in the civilian women's dormitory. But her photo albums show that her friend group was mostly made up of WACs. They would have had much more in common as enlisted women. She drove a Mercury convertible and traveled all around the area. There are photos in her scrapbook of her visits to Pueblo ruins, river swimming trips, and visits to Santa Fe. And there's even a mention of her whipping around the project in her convertible in a GI memoir that we have in the collection. He said that she drove very fast. You can go to the next one. So this slide shows probably my favorite 2 slips of paper in our entire collections of Manhattan Projects material. And we do, if these are hard to see, these are reproduced in the exhibit, so you will get a chance to see those. So these 2 unassuming notes, so it's front and back, so it's actually 2 slips of paper, this small one and then this other one on the La Fonda letterhead, show Lou flirting with one of the censors who worked to read all of the mail sent and received from Los Alamos. So she must have been sending off a package, and in this package she slips this little note, and she says, "Dear censor, please seal the package for me. Thank you. Also put necessary stamps on it." Okay? And she must have put some coins in with it. And the censor writes back on the back. He says, "Dear Louise, despite the inconvenience involved, it has been a pleasure to be of service to you. Yours, 2035. P.S. Due to the insecurity of the mail, it would seem best to return your change of 4 cents in person at the La Fonda bar." And so the second letter, she says, "John Smith, sorry I couldn't make it, old man. How about a later date, Lou?" And he writes back, "Dear Lou, where do you get this old man stuff? Hereafter, send your missives. Attention to 2035 sealed. If not, they go through umpteen hands before reaching the intended. One can't even trust one's comrade. As you know, nothing is sacred to a censor. You name the time, place will be the La Fonda." So we don't know if the meeting at the La Fonda ever happened, but I really hope that it did. You can go to the next one. So the war's end saw the lifting of censorship, and Louise was finally able to tell her parents what she had been doing during the war. She attended the E Award ceremony to watch as her civilian friends were commended for their roles in the project. She also attended the parading ceremony at the Meritorious Service Award for the enlisted service members, and she is pictured in the second photo that I found her in. She is pictured circled in her white uniform with her fellow officers, and so that was the other photo that I discovered her in. Okay, you can go to the next one. By December of 1945, many of the enlisted personnel in Los Alamos were receiving their discharge orders. Louise's superiors wanted her to stay on into 1946 to see the majority of the naval personnel home. Captain Larkin, Parsons' deputy and the top Navy officer on site when Parsons was in the Pacific, requested a promotion to lieutenant junior grade if she would agree to stay on duty for an additional 180 days. There is correspondence in the collection showing that the Navy officers wanted this promotion for Lou quickly and before the end of the year because they wanted to make it her Christmas present. And I think that really shows how much they appreciated her work. So by July of 1946, most of the naval personnel in Los Alamos had been sent home. Louise saw them all off, handling all of their final travel and pay details. And I love this letter on the left. So this is a letter that she wrote to one of the Navy men that she had worked closely with. And it's one of the last letters that she sent from Los Alamos. And it shows her no-nonsense character and her level of comfort with the men that she worked with. And so she's telling him that he left all of his stuff in the hall. And she says, "You leave it in the hall with half-baked instructions to ship it by freight. Are you entirely helpless? What kind of freight? You might have come in and asked if you hadn't heard any of the many discussions on the subject. And so she goes on, she chews him out. And at the end, she says, I trust this is plain enough. So she received her own detachment orders on July 17, 1946. So, hidden collections, archival debt. So this collection of material, comprised of documents, photographs, scrapbooks, and small artifacts, was donated by Louise's widower in 1987. She had passed several years prior. They didn't have any children. It was just the two of them. And he came out here to Los Alamos with this wonderful collection for us. It was originally processed and cataloged in the old catalog system in the late 1980s, but as we've talked about, not transferred into the digital catalog in 1993. In the years it sat unknown, many who had known and worked with Louise were still alive. Several of the Navy Manhattan Project veterans lived into the early 2000s and were in regular contact with our archive. Many donated their own collections of materials to us. If detailed processing and access had been achieved during that time, there could have been potential conversations about Louise and her contributions to the project. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and we lost that knowledge. So we can dig these little morsels out of the collection that she gave us, but we really don't have a firm grasp of what exactly she did during the project, how much she knew, how integral she was to the Navy office at that time. I can imagine what her role would have been, but we don't have that solid evidence. It would have been wonderful to be able to ask Dick Ashworth before he passed what he remembered of Louise. So, will we ever know the extent of her work on the project? I don't know. I really hope we do. I hope that somewhere out there, someone's collection appears with more documents. But her collection is a wonderful part of our archive. And like so many of our collection, it raises even more questions for us. What stories are important? Whose voices matter? Since the decisions were made that caused this archival debt, there has been a shift in archives. So now we understand and appreciate the value of these hidden voices. The voices of women and other marginalized groups give us a richer, deeper understanding of history and a unique viewpoint. It is now our priority and our privilege to seek out these hidden collections and provide greater access so that their stories can be told.
Awesome.
I am up here because I am the collections portion of this team. I am also the exhibits portion, but actually it's all of us, and they didn't know that till I came on. So I want to talk a little bit about this exhibit specifically that you all will be able to go over and see when we're done here shortly. First, I want to say thank you to a few people, which is, one, we had an intern who digitized part of our collection for us, which was a huge help. Her name was Claudia Chacon, who is right here. Thank you so much. I don't know if Jillian Puckett is still here.
No, I think she had to leave.
Okay, she had to leave. She has come to volunteer in the archives. She did not know that when she started that we were in the middle of this process and we would then submerge her in water over exhibit design. So she was also very helpful and helped us put the exhibit together this week. We also want to thank Fast Signs, who actually produced our panels for us for this exhibit, along with Yemen's Machine Shop, who kindly installed the hardware on the back of those panels, because one thing the archive staff is precision with our hardware. So we were thankful to have somebody who had that skill set. You will notice in this exhibit that there are bright, shiny cases. They are beautiful, they are brand new. We have 7 of them spread out around the museum campus. And we really want to thank the board of the Historical Society for approving that purchase. That is a huge step in museum best practices for protecting our collection. Those are archival quality, and so they protect against UV and other things that might damage the collection. They make a very scary seal when you put the lid on, like the air whooshes out. It's very impressive. So be sure that you admire the cases because they're very pretty and we love them a lot. Hey, oh look, it comes back. That's kind of scary. So if you don't know much about exhibit design and the process, they have given you a good idea of the research that goes into that. And it is very extensive. We relied very heavily, very heavily on Tina's documentation and collection of the WAC information. That was a huge resource in even writing up the text on the panels. We have also been really fortunate in this community. We had more material, obviously, than we knew about to pull from. And that is a huge thanks to the people of this community who love history and who love this place and who are willing to preserve its history. And we are so fortunate to be able to tell those stories and to share what we have learned about those women through the artifacts and papers that have come to us and photographs. And we have just a tiny fraction, a tiny fraction of what we had available to us on display because unfortunately we could not fit everything. You will think that we thought we fit everything. If you've already been in there, you probably thought, I think this was everything they had. It was not. No. So we are just so fortunate and thankful to have been able to do that. And I really hope that you all enjoy the exhibit, and if you have any questions about artifacts that were selected, how those get selected, if you have more questions on research or photographs, or if you happen to have a WAC in your family and you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is the place. They were here.
Yeah. Yes.
This is absolutely the place. So I've been researching the Women's Army Corps for quite a few years now. To be honest, I'm in my 6th year of my long-suffering husband's patience. We have more material than the National Women's Army Museum on the Women's Army Corps. We have more first-hand accounts from the women of the Los Alamos Project and the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. I would get excited because I would find an interview at the Michigan State University Archives and be so excited. We've got one from Minnesota, one from Washington, a couple from here and there. We really do have, in my opinion, the most extensive, deep, incredible collection of materials on the Women's Army Corps in Los Alamos, and that's because of our donors and our community. And Pat.
Yeah. Are we good for Q&A? Okay, we are going to go ahead and do a short Q&A, probably maybe 10 minutes or so. I'll leave that determination to Rachel, because she's the boss in this situation.
If people don't have questions, can they go to the museum?
I don't know. Ask Rachel.
We have a question.
I don't know, I just wondered if people don't have questions, if the museum was open. Okay, if some people wanted to be like, I'm out of here.
My question is, when FDR signed that legislation forming the WACs, did they also form the waves and the spars?
Not all at the same time, but within
Roughly the same time period, yes. There was a big push to get it.
One thing women might be interested in, my sister joined the spars, I believe it was 42, and she ran the mess hall. Well, first of all, the spars had their boot camp at a fancy hotel in Palm Beach.
Nice. See?
Nice.
And she ran the mess hall in Seattle for the duration of the war. But as a petty officer, the Coast Guard did not allow women to be officers.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think the spars were the first that were, I think, the first women's kind of auxiliaries.
Yeah.
I think the Coast
Yeah.
Guard was first, and then, yeah, that's awesome.
That's amazing. Please tell me that she has donated her materials to an archive or a repository near her, or her children will. You put that bug in their ear.
I've only been here for 12 years, so I'm not familiar with a lot of what's going on. Where is the Bruce House? Which one is that?
Oh,
Spruce Cottage.
Spruce
Do you
Cottage.
want to-
Yeah, one of you guys.
The Spruce Cottage is actually, the museum building is right here, the guest cottage. The building just beyond that is Spruce Cottage. So it's right here on Bathtub Row and is one of the buildings that was built for the ranch school.
And it's a private residence right now, but you can walk by it.
And then I have one suggestion. I spent 4 years in the Navy, and you start out not as an ensign, but an ensign.
Ensign, thank you. That is, yeah, any help we can get with any of the military pronunciation or lingo is always helpful for us.
Thank you, Diana, for
Hey.
helping us.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say something about my mother, Alberta. And her aunt was the WAC Mary Lucy Miller that was referenced. And that was her uncle married Mary Lucy Miller after the war. And do you remember about can you say before when you saw her picture? And then we saw, do you remember? Oh, okay. So we were, I was living in Santa Fe, I wasn't out here. We were just up here visiting, his family was in. And we first went to the Bradbury, and my mom spotted a picture of Mary Lucy Miller. And she was, oh my goodness. And then we came over to the Los Alamos History Museum. And we were flipping through the books about the wax, and there were some references for her. And I didn't get going on it for years, till years later. But that's how it all began. So. Luckily, she had some gorgeous portraits and things that we had saved, and we have a family of savers, so it is good to pass those things on. Anyway.
And you will see one of those portraits of Mary Lucy in the museum on her panel.
Earlier this evening, you mentioned a lady by the name of Wainwright.
Yeah, Jane Wainwright.
Has your research determined whether or not she was any kin to General Wainwright from the Bataan March?
No, I actually do, for some of these women, I do dig into their genealogical history as I'm trying to make the connections, but I have not gone into her genealogical history, no. But that is a really interesting concept, and I'm going to write that down. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, someone has headed over to the museum. The guest cottage is located directly behind Fuller Lodge, and our rotating gallery, when you enter, is to the left. And there's lots to see. And I know our staff here will hang around a little bit to answer questions. And thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you.